Let's talk about video game marketing, particularly where trailers are concerned. I sort of bring this up because I saw this article from Variety whose headline reads, Ana de Armas fans, lawsuit puts studios at risk over deceptive trailers. A summary of what that article talks about can be found here via Culture Crave's tweet that reads, a federal judge has ruled that movie studios can be sued under false advertising if they release deceptive movie trailers. This comes after two Ana de Armas fans filed a lawsuit after renting the movie yesterday because she was in the trailer but did not appear in the movie. Now, it's interesting that Culture Crave highlights this particular image because this is a shot from Avengers Infinity War where the trailer did not fully reflect what actually happens in the movie. Hulk is featured here in this particular sequence, but we all know that Hulk had a very different trajectory in the actual movie. I'd say that's a less egregious example than Ana de Armas being featured in a trailer but not being in the movie. I would say that definitely constitutes as more blatant false marketing. With the Avengers situation, some might say that was more about trying to avoid spoilers and to preserve the narrative for people watching the movie, though, I've heard arguments on both sides on that front. Now, this might not be related to video games, but the second people saw this news break, you can see right here how many likes it got, which implies that many people agree that there is a lot of deceptive marketing that goes on in trailers, but in the games industry, a lot of people began talking about this tweet and retweeting this particular news, and a ton of people essentially gave the games industry this look. If you ask me, out of all visual mediums, video games tend to have the most deceptive trailers. Some of the trailers that they release, especially where CGI trailers are concerned, have literally nothing to do with what we actually see in the game. You know what I mean? It's not even like a cutscene in the game. It's just this completely separate marketing material that does not really reflect what's happening in the game, what you're going to experience in the game. They'll show imagery that's related to the game. They'll show certain characters and certain, combat maneuvers or whatever, the setting and all these things. And so you get an idea for the vibe of the game, maybe, but even then, the CGI trailers tend to be exaggerated in terms of the kind of graphics fidelity you can expect, in terms of the kind of gameplay and combat and mechanics you can expect. I just kind of wanted to discuss this topic because I'm curious as to what people generally think in terms of where trailers should be headed into the future. Are CGI trailers okay in certain situations? Should they just outright be excluded from marketing materials because they tend to be just so exaggerated and just so irrelevant to the actual gameplay that players will experience? Video games, as far as I know, are the only visual medium, where they're showing trailers that literally are not reflective of the gameplay or of the product you'll actually receive in any way, shape, or form. With movies, even if they occasionally change a few things around because they want to avoid spoilers or whatever in the trailers tend to be generally reflective of what we'll see in the final product. They tend to show the camera work, the characters, the shots that they filmed, and sure, some things might change here and there. Effects might differ a little bit, or the color grading might differ a little bit, and certain shots might be a little longer in the trailer, and they might be cut a little bit in the actual movie. And there have been occasions where a trailer shows one shot that ultimately doesn't make it to the final cut, but generally when you watch the trailer, you're like, oh, okay, I know sort of how the movie's gonna look. I'm getting what the vibe's all about. A lot of what you see in the trailers will be what you'll see in the final product, though of course sometimes the way trailers are framed, some trailers make movies look better than they actually end up being, and sure, there's an argument to be made there, but at the very least, what's in that trailer we will see in the movie in some way, shape, or form. The CGI trailers we see for video games, none of that stuff ultimately makes it into the final cut because it's a CGI trailer that's not actually reflective of how we'll be interacting with the game. If you ask me, the only time a CGI trailer is acceptable if it's just sort of a title reveal saying, we're going to announce this game, we're working on it, it's super early in development, but we wanted to put out there and announce that this thing is in the works. It helps draw new people to their studios and stuff like that. Like what Elder Scrolls 6 did, yes, some people would argue, they announced it too early, but it's not as if they're showing gameplay or CGI trailer that tries to represent itself as, here's what you'll play in the game. They just showed like a little landscape, the title Elder Scrolls 6, and they basically said, we're working on it. It'll come out sometime down the line, many, many years later, but it was just sort of an announcement title trailer. That kind of stuff's innocent enough because, again, they're not trying to show us a representation of gameplay that is vastly exaggerated or, just vastly superior to what we'll actually get to play. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got publishers like Ubisoft who show CGI trailers for upcoming games like Assassin's Creed, and they'll immediately put up pre-orders, but they'll take people's money without having shown any actual gameplay, without having shown people anything that is actually representative of the product that people will receive and actually play. Assassin's Creed Mirage, for example, cool CGI trailer, I guess, but that's not how the game will look, and that's certainly not how the game will play. That's certainly not the level of fidelity we can expect during gameplay, and yet they've shown one CGI trailer, pre-orders have gone up, they're taking people's money, but they've shown nothing of the actual product. Another egregious example, I'd say, is Fallout 76. That was a game whose pre-orders went up before they revealed that game was going to be online only. I think they teased it a little bit with some kind of teaser trailer, if I recall, and then they put up pre-orders, but it wasn't until Jason Schreier did an investigative report and leaked the fact that Fallout 76 would be an online-only game that people realized, oh, now I know what I'm actually buying. At the very least, pre-orders shouldn't be allowed to go up. Money shouldn't be taken until they've shown something tangible from within the game. I don't feel like developers should be allowed to announce a game through a CGI trailer and have pre-orders go up before they've shown any gameplay whatsoever. Something that gives us a tangible idea of what this game actually is, how it'll look, and how it'll play. And I don't know of any other medium that can get away with that level of disconnect between the marketing material and the actual product, what people will actually experience. Now, down the line, Assassin's Creed Mirage will show gameplay before the final game comes out. People can cancel their pre-orders if they so desire, if they see gameplay and they're not satisfied with what they see. But, for a lot of folks, for the average Joe who's, looking to buy their kid the next Xbox or PlayStation or PC game, they might just see this one CGI trailer and go, oh, that looks really cool, and base their purchase decision based off of the CGI trailer, because they're not the kind of folks who scour the internet for all the gaming news, for all the trailers that come out for this game. So those CGI trailers can still be negatively impactful, in my opinion. They can still be deceptive to a portion of the gaming population that's not sort of the hardcore people who are looking for every single gameplay footage or every single trailer that comes out for a game and really analyzing a game before they make that purchase decision. Now, step above those kinds of trailers, I'd say, are those fake gameplay trailers, because those pretend to be the actual game, right? They're not telling you this is just a CGI trailer that's hyping up the game with, visuals that are not representative of the final game. They're telling you this is what the game will look and feel like. This is what you'll experience. But it all turns out to be bullshit. That's what happened with Anthem when they showed us that first trailer, which looked significantly more awesome than the trailers that followed. And the final game obviously turned out to be worse than any of the trailers that was shown prior to the game's launch. Ubisoft is also infamous for that. That first version of Watch Dogs we saw via that reveal trailer, or The Division, that very first trailer we saw, significantly higher quality than what we actually experienced in the final game. The difference was night and day. Rainbow Six Siege is also an excellent example where the final game, it's in a much better place now, but that initial launch period was seriously rough, and plenty of comparison videos highlighted the level of deceptive marketing that occurred there, where the company pretended like the gameplay we saw in the trailers was essentially what we're going to experience. Not to say that there isn't a certain level of flexibility they have to grant developers, because game development is this ever-evolving thing, and just things are bound to change, from 1 year ago to now, you know what I mean? But it's one thing for a few assets to get slightly adjusted, or the color grading to be a little different, or, for the draw distance to be a little worse in the final game than it is in the trailer, versus just showing something that looks so much better, so much more cinematic, so much more just higher fidelity, and so much more polished than what we get in the final product. I don't know how game companies continue to get away with that with really not much in the way of repercussions. I don't know how, companies haven't been sued for significant sums of money. I don't know how they haven't faced consequences. That's why they keep doing this, because they've gotten away with it for so long. And sure, they'll face some backlash from the population, but, if the games are selling, then ultimately it doesn't matter, because their bottom line is that they met certain financial quotas, and, they haven't been busted by government agencies or whatever. All they're facing is that critique from people, which does have a negative impact on their reputation and the PR surrounding the company. But as long as their bottom lines are met, they'll continue to engage in these deceptive practices. And then another layer to sort of deceptive or misleading marketing in gaming is something like No Man's Sky, where the trailers shown are, first of all, not only deceptive in just how much more feature complete it looks, but they're also kind of vague. And then information conveyed through word of mouth, that's where the majority of the deception happens. It's great that No Man's Sky is in a much better place now, but there is no denying the travesty it was Sean Murray's. Anytime he spoke about the game and anytime he was asked about certain features, he lied about so much of it. He once infamously said that if two people happen to be on the same planet in the universe of No Man's Sky, they'll be able to see each other. On the first day that the game came out, people managed to pull that off, except they realized, wait, I can't see the other person. That was just a straight up lie. So that's a situation where the trailers didn't confirm or debunk a certain feature. Instead, a developer came out and said, yes, this is a thing that we'll have in the game, but the trailers didn't give people enough information, and then the word of mouth from the developer was just a straight up lie. So people purchased the game based on just false pretenses and just straight up false information. That's also another area of deceptive marketing where I'm like, how did they get away with that? How were they not sued on some level, or how were they not reprimanded by certain government officials and certain government organizations that look into this kind of stuff? Again, I'm glad they're doing better now, and what they've done with No Man's Sky, some would argue, has made up for a lot of those past misgivings because all of the content updates were free. The overhauls have been amazing, and the game's, it is what was initially promised and then some now, which is great, but that, doesn't change the fact that that initial deceptive marketing did happen, and it's something worth examining. And then there's one last category of deceptive trailers or misleading trailers that's done intentionally for the sake of the narrative. So Hideo Kojima is well known for having done this. Metal Gear Solid 2, he essentially presented a video game where you play as Solid Snake. Both in the Tanker chapter and the Shout chapter, there are certain trailers where Solid Snake was shown as a playable character in the chapter where you actually play as Raiden. But there was intent behind it. There was artistic intent. And I do remember at the time when MGS2 first launched, that wasn't received particularly well. People just didn't like Raiden all that much because they found him whiny and just not as cool as Solid Snake, and people wanted to play Solid Snake. And I think now looking back, people are more fond of what Kojima went for there, and they appreciate what Kojima was trying to do there, especially with how relevant that actually is to the narrative, with the whole S3 plan and all the reveals at the end. And then with The Last of Us Part 2, that's, I think, a really controversial example where Naughty Dog wanted to essentially preserve the big spoiler that Joel dies early on in the game, and so they made it seem like Joel is on this journey with Ellie in the long term, and that he's in the game a lot more. And they even switched out certain character models of older Joel versus younger Joel just to kind of throw people off in terms of the order of events, and to just really try to make people think that Joel is in it for the long haul, because their intent was to really shock people with Joel's death, make it really gruesome, and just really give people that sense of hatred, because hatred is such a major theme of this game, and that hatred being the driving force of Ellie when she sort of pursues Abby. And then, they wanted to create that inner conflict of, playing as Abby and being on the other side of the fence and seeing both perspectives and having that inner conflict. So there was artistic intent behind it. Whether it worked or not, obviously, depending on who you ask, people will either approve or say that was just an awful way to approach things. I'm really curious what people think about that aspect, because that's where I can see some divide, where some people might say that's okay because it is for artistic intent. Others will say, well, it's still deceptive anyway. It's still ultimately lying to people and not really conveying the appropriate information. And this is an example that's more in line with, what Marvel movies tend to do, like with Avengers Infinity War, where Hulk was shown in this war scene when in reality in the final movie he's completely absent from that sequence. And it's like, is that justified when it's for the preservation of the narrative, or because the developer or the creative just wants to make people think a certain thing about the narrative, because the twist that happens when people find out what the actual movie or actual game shows, there's an impact that's supposed to have, that the creators want to achieve, and to that end, can people forgive the deception with artistic intent, if you will? Because with MGS2, a lot of people now seem to be over it. Last of Us Part 2, that still feels a little fresh, where some people really didn't like what they did there, and I'm just generally curious what the opinions surrounding that are. With MGS2, it was almost kind of worse. Again, people now appreciate it, but they never hinted at Raiden one bit. Whereas in Last of Us Part 2, Joel was technically in the game, but his fate, the way his journey played out in the game, was just not what people expected because the trailer seemed to hint at something else entirely. I don't know, that's one area where I think the lines are blurry, and I really don't have an answer for you because there are certain instances where it really did work, and then there are other instances where it didn't. But, you know, whether something should be legally pursued, should that be based off of whether we enjoyed the way the twist happened versus whether we didn't enjoy it? You know, if we enjoyed the way Kojima sort of misled us and deceived us, then it's okay. But if, with The Last of Us Part 2, if it didn't appeal to certain people on a visceral level, then suddenly it's okay to legally say that's wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, where do you draw the line? But I will say that as far as CGI trailers go, man, unless, again, it's a very vague title showcase that just announces that a game is in development, I don't think CGI trailers should really be allowed, you know what I mean? Because they are so completely detached from the final product of, the video game that is being promoted more often than not. And then the fake gameplay trailers, that's straight up just lying. You know what I mean? That's just straight up saying, this is our game, except it's not, right? At least with CGI trailers, you on some level know, well, that's clearly exaggerated. But it is also trying to hype you up with footage that, again, is so relevant to the final product. And then, of course, vague trailers that are purposely made vague so that the developer can say whatever the hell they want about the features that will be included in the game, only for all of that to be a lie. Or trailers that, don't really highlight the full scope of a game. Like monetization is something that trailers don't tend to touch on because they know that it's going to receive backlash and because it's something that they don't want to be a prominent aspect of the marketing, given the negative sentiment surrounding the awful monetization surrounding those microtransactions heavy games. You got situations like Diablo Immortal where developers have straight up said you can't do pay to win in this game. You can't buy power, except you can. And in fact, you have to spend like $100,000 or more, hundreds of thousands of dollars to essentially max out your character at a reasonable pace. Otherwise, you'll be grinding forever. And then don't get me started with the marketing materials of mobile games, how utterly deceptive they are, how utterly the trailers misrepresent the final game, and just, all of the manipulative ways in which those kinds of garbage, microtransactions infested, sort of addiction-fueling games, the way they're presented, those are some of the most egregious examples of misleading marketing in video games. But as far as like the AAA, AA, that kind of landscape is concerned, a lot of indie titles really do show just the game, you know what I mean? And people just fall in love with the game because they feel like what the trailer showed was actually what they got. And then there are certain AAA game development studios like, Kojima Productions. Say what you want about Hideo Kojima, but when he does show trailers, he actually shows you in-game cutscenes. He never shows you CGI trailers. And, even with Death Stranding, he did technically show us the game, right? The delivery man stuff that people just thought, there's got to be more to it than that. But that actually turned out to be the game. We just refused to believe it because we're so used to Kojima, having something up his sleeve. And I do feel like because people have been speaking out so much against, like, those events where they're like, we're going to show you brand new footage, and they show CGI trend, people go, well, I don't know, that really didn't give us much. Like, I think there's been a pushback surrounding just the degree to which CGI trailers are prioritized over gameplay trailers, even during those reveal trailers where people just want to see the game. And so I feel like developers and publishers are less prone to engaging that way and whatnot. Though sometimes, they'll mislead you, like how Ubisoft did with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where they said, we'll show you gameplay during this stream or whatever. And what they showed was really cinematically shot gameplay where, it was like technically in-engine, but they didn't actually show somebody playing the game. They just showed the character performing a bunch of cool moves with cinematically shot camera movements that you don't see in the final game. So I'd say stuff like that, even if it's technically in-engine, is still on some level deceptive. So there's still stuff like that still happens, but I do feel like the games industry in general has become more conscious of not, overly doing the CGI trailers promotions. But that doesn't mean we still don't get a lot of those CGI trailers. And, it's hard not to be paranoid about gameplay trailers that almost look too good because they might just be vertical slices presented as essentially, final game footage or something close to it when in reality it's not. And it's just, it's dissolving the trust that people have in any of the marketing materials that video games tend to present. It has a negative impact on the industry as a whole and on publishers' ability to market their games. Just show us the freaking game. I'm not saying misleading marketing doesn't happen in movies, but when they do show us a trailer of the movie, at least we're looking at footage from the movie. We're not looking at a CGI trailer of the final movie where the CGI trailer looks better than the movie. You know what I mean? Like, video games, I feel like they're the only industry that get away with that, and I don't know how that hasn't been discussed more or been just kind of reprimanded more by officials who look into deceptive practices. But I don't know, these are the kinds of thought processes that went into my brain when I saw this tweet right here by Culture Crave, and when I saw that this was a lawsuit that was happening and a judge actually said, okay, movie studios, stop advertising movies under false pretenses, which is a fair ruling. As far as the video game landscape is concerned, what do you think the lines are drawn as far as CGI trailers are concerned, gameplay trailers are concerned, or, you know, those narratively deceptive, that, you know, intentionally deceptive for the purposes of preserving, you know, not spoiling certain narrative aspects, all of that stuff? Where do you draw the lines with this kind of stuff, with video game marketing, with video game trailers, with video game footage that's shown before the launch of a game? This is my take. Share yours in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.